Hi there, Vasco Duarte here, your host. I wanted to share a story with you. You know how sometimes Agile just feels like following another checklist? When processes and frameworks feel more important than what we are trying to achieve, and sometimes even like handcuffs. I was talking to a customer of the Global Agile Summit, and he used a term that I kind of stuck in my mind. He said, I have agile fatigue. And I've heard that a lot from people since then. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be this way. So we started thinking, and at the Global Agile Summit, which is happening this May, we're bringing together practitioners who've actually done that, who've broken free from this, install the framework kind of mindset. We want to focus the summit on real-life, first-person stories of Agile succeeding that inspire you to action. We're talking real experiences, practical solutions, and of course, amazing insights from leaders like Gojko Adzic, who will be one of the keynote speakers, and Jürgen Apelo, who will be one of the keynote speakers as well. If you're ready to leave the Agile fatigue behind, just join us in Tallinn. The early bird tickets are now available at the globalagilesummit.com. And mark your calendars. We will have workshops on May 18th. That's a Sunday. And then the conference itself will happen on May 19th and 20th of 2025 in Tallinn, Estonia. So let's make Agile exciting again. And remember, go to globalagilesummit.com, that is, and get your early bird ticket now. It will only be available until early March, so grab it now. And now, on to the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to one more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. This week, we have with us Antti Horelli. Hey, Antti, welcome to the show.
Hi, Vasco. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. So Antti is a fellow Finn. I mean, I'm not a Finn, but I do live in Finland. Antti is an Agile coach from Finland dedicated to empowering teams. He carries with him a systems-oriented, empathetic approach that allows him to foster collaboration and effective communication. With decades in IT, Antti transitioned to from technical roles to methodology, where he passionately helps people and teams reach their full potential. So Antti, that was a short intro. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you end up becoming a Scrum Master?
Okay, thanks for asking. That's a bit of a story in itself. Well, I guess in this sense, my story is kind of typical. So I've studied computer science. When I went into work life, I kind of thought that tech is my thing. Those are the problems I want to, solve, and that's how I make the world better. And several years went by, and I was very happy doing that. But then I did kind of have this, at least I'm not sure if it was that at the moment, but looking back, a kind of epiphany moment when I was doing work in my dev team, and it wasn't maybe a team in the real meaning of the word. I had 3 separate projects that I was doing, and then everyone else was doing other things. And then I had 3 stakeholders come to my desk during the same morning and say that you have to do this. I think this is the most important. And I was a developer. I didn't really understand the business value of all of that. I didn't feel I was the correct person to make the priority decision on which one of these things I should be doing. And then I started thinking that maybe actually, when I thought all the problems was on the tech side, maybe there's something also difficult on the human side, on what we choose to do, how we organize to do stuff, all that. And then in our organization, a Scrum Master role was introduced. I raised my hand. I want to try that. And here we are. At some point, I made even a partly conscious career shift to trying out Agile coaching as my whole thing. And I haven't written code for years now. So.
Very good, very good. This sounds familiar. The whole story of, code is interesting, technology challenges are interesting, but then you get to work in a team or a group of teams, and then you figure out that actually the technology part is the easy one.
Yep.
So
At least that you can solve. Like you can like to say, now this is done. Very rarely in the teamwork in the process area, you can say that, okay, this is now done.
yeah, absolutely. That's a good point, actually, because when it comes to people, nothing is done. We're in constant flux, and when you put loads of people together, collaborating and being affected by decisions, moods, illnesses, whatever you have in mind, that becomes a lot more complex. Now, of course, that complexity and the human side is filled with amazing things, right? When people reach their potential, when they achieve great things together. But as Scrum Masters and Agile coaches, we sometimes need to go through some difficult stories before we can achieve those great things. And today is Fail Monday here on the podcast, Antti. So let's explore one of those stories. Tell us a little bit about the context and then walk us through the story. Like we'll take the takeaways later. We'll discuss what we can learn from it later. But tell us that story, Antti.
All right. Well, actually, I've got kind of two short ones. And one is kind of small scope one and the other is bigger. At the early parts of my Scrum Master career, I very clearly remember one sprint planning that was kind of my go-to horrible sprint planning ever later on. And my team, we kind of thought we had Scrum going, we were doing decent there, but for some reason we came into sprint planning like totally unprepared. I guess that happens. Something more important took our time in the previous weeks. And then we didn't really realize that. We just started planning. And then the whole planning thing took about 2 days. And everyone was
Tell us a little bit more. So
super frustrated.
You get into the room, right? And you're thinking maybe it's going to take 1 hour or 2 hours, right? And then things start.
Well, we kind of looked at, okay, we're not really clear. So maybe it'll be like half a day or something, 3 hours. That might be usual tricky planning for us. But then we slowly start to understand that we don't really know the stuff we have on our backlog. We look into them. They started kind of sort of exploding. Like, okay, actually, this is way bigger. We have to look into this before we can commit to anything. Before we can even say, can we do this or not, and all that. And for some reason, we didn't realize this. We just kind of slugged all this refinement stuff into the planning itself. Maybe we should have just stepped back and split or something and do refinement, just focus on that or something. And okay, that was half of the problem. The big kind of bummer game actually after the 2 days, because for some reason, and I think this wasn't typical for us, but for some reason, there was something business-wise happening in the background that kind of messed our whole backlog up. The thing we had just very painfully tried to get a grip of, and it messed it up like the very next day. So we had a painful 2-day planning, and then on the third day, we just started kind of the sprint. The PO came back and said, actually, this is all the wrong stuff.
Wow, that must have been very frustrating for the team.
Yeah, I think the whole team kind of says, oh, really? Okay, we're going to go to the bar right now. We'll be back in an hour.
We'll not be back in an hour.
Oh, well, let's see. we were fairly, how do you say, responsible, but still that was like, oh my God, no. That's like maybe the single most frustrating moment in a lot of my career. I remember the kind of emotion still.
Yeah, that stays with us, right? Like you put a lot of effort into understanding stuff that okay, we weren't ready, but we need to work through them, and you put a lot of effort into trying to understand those back and forth, making technical decisions, maybe even being emotionally committed to some kind of architectural pathway, and then suddenly everything changes. Wow.
Yeah, and the emotion kind of piled up there, so it's kind of bad luck, I guess, in that sense as well, but still.
So when you look at this story, like what would you do differently today?
Well, one thing I have really taken to heart is that refinement work really pays off. So the first kind of bigger problem or the smaller problem, we try not to get into that. Or then if we do realize that in the sprint planning we're all over the place, we don't really know the items here, then maybe like say we're not doing planning today, we will do refinement work today and kind of focus on that and figure out how to do that best, maybe split into smaller groups or something, depending on how big of a team you have, and then do the planning the next day or something like that. But I guess the bigger problem was that we just did not, for some reason, have visibility into the backlog or like the backlog we did, but kind of what was happening like on the higher level. And usually our product owner knew this stuff and kind of brought it into to us, but for some reason that didn't happen at that time. So making really sure that these kind of higher level things that happen and that might kind of affect what we do eventually absolutely will affect what the team does. We know about them at least a little bit, so it doesn't seem so emotionally stressful when they kind of mess things up. I mean, change happens, and that's something to understand, and that's okay. But it's always worse when you kind of get blindsided by something you maybe didn't have to get blindsided by. You could have known.
So that's where the famous trade-off comes in, right? Like you can share a lot with the team so that they are aware of what's going on and what might be coming their way. But then there's also the point where, is this too much? So when you look at that trade-off, which is, I mean, it's a fair question, like how much can we share? Because not all things that are going on will turn out to be decisions, or, they won't turn out to be reality because they are just hypotheses, ideas that are being discussed. When you look at that question, like how do you define it for yourself? Where do you draw the line between what's sharing just enough or oversharing with the team?
Wow, that's a really good question. So kind of balancing communication so you don't overwhelm anyone, but still enough. That's a really tricky thing, and I think it goes wider, like between development teams, for example. How much do they need to talk to each other so that they know what they're doing, so they don't like do tech decisions that hamper each other, but they can't know all the details because then they'll just be communicating all the time and not getting anything else done. I don't have kind of a rule for that. I think it's maybe more of a instinct or something like that. And well, maybe it's kind of the litmus test is that if we seem to have retrospectives or other situations where this thing comes up as a problem often, then we have to do something about it. We have to share more. But if it's on the other side that people feel that they're getting overburdened with information, they would just want to focus on development work, then we have tried to tone it down a little bit. And it goes kind of up and down. It depends on the situation, the kind of volatility of the organization, stuff like that. So
I really like that, using the retro as kind of a thermometer, checking if it's too much or too little. Another thought that I had is that the product owner would come into the team, like, for example, a sprint review or even a retrospective if the PO is participating, and say, hey, there's these things going on, not sharing any details. Do you want to know about it? Right? And this is also an aspect of self-management for the team, because some teams will want to know more about something than others, and that's okay, right? Like, as long as it's information that is not somehow confidential, then it's perfectly okay to share. So I think that for us as Agile coaches and Scrum Masters, it's also about being able to always check in with the team. Hey, there's some stuff going on regarding a possibly new integration that is coming. Do you want to know more about it? It might not happen, but we're talking about it. Do you want to know more about it? Right? Like, leaving that option for the team to make a decision on their own. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a very good point, I think. And it also has the benefit of the team can kind of realize, maybe even from the kind of short 2-sentence description, that, okay, this might have technological impact that you actually might not know about. Let's talk about this a bit more. And it kind of gets them engaged in that way as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot.
Great point. Thank you for sharing that story, Antti.
All right. Thank you.
We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.